It's the moment you've all been waiting for. Time to unveil our top story of 2019. Now, much like education reform, the story spanned the entire year and fueled many of our discussions here at the Line Table. I'm talking about the U.S.-Mexico border and immigration issues. It started in January when Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham pulled National Guard troops from the border in defiance of President Trump. New Mexico has been at the center of all the news surrounding this issue, certainly, from the building of the wall to the detention of children immigrants and their families and asylum seekers that have flooded our state. Now, Jessica, you live in the center of the storm, so to speak.
I do.
What's been the biggest aspect of this story for you as you look back on 2019?
Well, certainly the human aspect of it. What we see every day, those emotional photos that come to the forefront of, families reaching for each other across a border wall, children in actual cages. The human aspect of the border issue, to me, is the primary one. But as part of border communities, as we call ourselves, we have an investment in securing that border. So also the local reaction to not only the national stance on immigration and migration, but certainly what the local communities are saying in response to it.
I have to take advantage of you being here to ask you, what was the response when the governor pulled those National Guard troops in your area? Up here in Albuquerque is one thing. Where you are, that's a whole other, right.
So the argument was twofold. First off is crime, right? So crime and also stopping drugs at the border.
Right.
So we understand that our portion of the state is the go-through for a lot of these illegal substances. So there was a lot of concern about that, and I think that brought about the decision by many of the counties. Well, Otero County was leading the charge in this and asking the governor to restore, and then making the threat of, if you do not, we're going to do it ourselves, or we're going to find a way to do it ourselves. The second part of that is really trying to struggle to understand to the struggle to make the rest of the nation understand what the culture of the border is like in southern New Mexico. It is so distinct, even between New Mexico and Mexico border versus Texas and the Mexico border itself. Our relationship with our southern counterparts, for the most part, is pretty amicable. We didn't want them to see it as a shot across the bow in declaring war, but I think that all of us really realized that there was an essential component to securing the border that maybe the rest of the nation wasn't seeing.
And how did that play when the governor made her move about our in-state security stuff? You remember that with our own folks? There was a whole lot of movement of personnel down there.
There was quite a bit of movement of personnel.
Yeah.
I think it was lauded in many cases. If we wanted to be able, if securing the border meant more bodies, then that's what we were going to say yes to anything that we could get. I think part of the problem, though, was who was showing up to kind of help this effort as well.
That's right.
We had some really interesting reporting on these militia groups that were coming down of their own and not really welcomed.
That's not over.
For their own,
Yeah. You know, Andy, up here in Albuquerque, interestingly, real budget issues were part of the equation for 2019. Interesting, and for the governor, certainly, overall, for the asylees and other folks coming through. How did that get handled in your view? Because I seem to remember talking at this table, there was going to be a line about how much money folks are going to be willing to spend, do you know what I mean, of taxpayer money on this.
Well, I think that was definitely a question coming from conservatives around the state when they see her pull troops back and they say, well, wait a minute, how are you going to do this, right? Looking at the mayor of Albuquerque, looking at the governor, both, and the mayor of Santa Fe, they all sort of said, we're going to let these people come in. And then, of course, it happened during the state fair where they put people at Expo New Mexico. And so there was a lot of, I think, ongoing questions about where this money comes from. How do we find support for these people coming through?
No doubt. You know, Steve, interestingly, I have to get in the Dreamers here and how we work in. We know where the governor is on Dreamers. We know where some Republicans are on Dreamers here. Politically, how does this all work out for the governor? How did 2019 sort of work out for her? Did she get through fairly unscathed on this issue, on the immigration issue?
Well, I wouldn't say unscathed. There was a lot of controversy about moving the troops and the police, and so I wouldn't say unscathed, but so far it looks like she navigated it pretty well, though I'm not going to predict smooth sailing next year.
Right. That will be difficult on this issue, that's for sure,
Really.
or any year. You know, Gwyneth, the idea that this political crossfire I'm getting to, we are as we mentioned, ground zero almost when you talk about immigration issues. You could look, the rest of the United States, just look at New Mexico, the whole thing's encapsulated here. Should we be doing something else on this immigration issue? Has the governor missed something in 2019? Is there something she need to make up in 2020 on this, or?
No, I think so many people outside New Mexico are really confused about who we are and how we play into this. You know, we lump Latinos and Hispanics into this giant pot, and New Mexico is one big piece of that pot, but we are a very distinct one. I think that people don't talk quite often enough about how, you know, that the Hispanic population in New Mexico has been here longer than everybody else. They are super Americans, right? And so we say, you know, who are these people who are you know, out there holding signs at the Trump rally saying, you know, immigrants go home? How hypocritical they must be. I'm not sure why we say that Hispanics in New Mexico aren't allowed to want to shut the door behind them like everybody else does.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important for the governor to keep talking about New Mexico as a culture and how we have mixed and how we have accommodated waves of immigrants from all over, and how we have made that work, because I think it does work pretty well.
And that's the story the rest of the U.S. doesn't know. That last bit you just say there, they have no idea how we've been able to, not always smoothly, not always comfortably, but somehow we've been able to get to this point where we can just coexist with each other.
Our border has been very porous for almost the entire time that people have been here, and it's worked.
Exactly right. The politics of all this, Andy, once again, as the governor moves towards a re-election cycle, immigration is going to be a big one for her. She's on solid ground so far, or where do you see her at?
Well, I do think that there's actually a sort of faction of free market libertarian, whatever you want to call them, who are, for lack of a better term, are for open borders, right? They'll probably argue they're not for open borders, but there's this economics part of it, right? We have jobs, we need to have workers, we need these things, and so I think that you're going to see some pockets of voters that are going to say, yeah, good for her to let some people in, and maybe we can get some more employees in the state.
And this all, Steve, you know, when you think about the atmospherics of all this, what Gwyneth and Andy just mentioned, it really depends on what comes out of the White House, doesn't it, on this immigration issue? That's sort of, we're bouncing against that. We're reacting to things that are coming out of the White House.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is one reason I've been saying that I don't think Trump has much of a chance of winning this state next year.
Yeah. Well, that's part of that discussion, but is it enough? Is that, they come in guns blazing on immigration? Is that the turnkey for them, for the Trump folks here?
No, I think that's a driving force for a lot of support, yeah. And the anti-immigration, immigrants go home.
Right.
So,
interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know how, even if Trump's defeated next year, you know, some of these feelings, some of these attitudes aren't going to go away.
Right. We'll finish this segment with you, Jess, as we started, because you have the closest view of the situation. What are you predicting for the border next year? What could happen there? Again, outside of the federal stuff, you know?
That's an interesting question.
I got one for you. Is there a movement for landowners not to give over land for the wall? Is there a small movement?
There is certainly discussion, yes.
Yeah.
I think part of that discussion is, even if we do, say we contribute to this movement, in the long term, what does that mean for us? How do we continue to secure this border? This discussion is interesting to me because what people don't truly understand about the border is it's long, and a very small portion of it is New Mexico. So when you call New Mexico kind of like the central aspect of what's happening at the border and with the border issues, it's always a bit of irony for me because there is a very small portion of us that actually intersects with that Mexico border. But we tend to see everything kind of coalesce in those communities as well. So if I had to make a prediction, I would say that you're going to see a lot of, and in the same vein as Gwen was saying, you're going to see a lot of support for doing a bit more to secure the border. I don't think anybody disagrees that there are reasons to do that. The way that they go about it perhaps is always going to be the center of conflict.
Are there any hot spots showing themselves at the border at this point? Any places that are more stressed than others? Any communities that are more stressed than others?
So when we talk about borders, we talk about border communities mostly, but what we fail to really talk about are also entry points. And there was, for a period there, where large groups were moving through they were
numbers
basically
were
giving
big,
themselves the
yeah.
numbers were huge, 200, 300, 400 people at a time.
That's right.
So we're not seeing people just, trump across the desert and find a place to cross. They're actually being very strategic about this. And then the burden that puts on local communities who are trying to do their part to be human as possible and give support is also one of the stressors for us.
Very much so. Want to thank all of our journalists for joining us on one of our favorite shows of the year. When we look back at the year that was, we invite you to join the conversation on Facebook. You can share your thoughts on our show, Facebook page, NM in Focus. Or if you haven't already, join our Focus on New Mexico Facebook group. And to this group right here, I want to say, guys, thank you very much. A wonderful 2019. All your contributions to us here, we appreciate that. We'll see you in 2020.